Anyway, I'm Sally Hodder. I'm director of the Clinical and Translational Science Institute and associate vice president for clinical and translational research at the Health Sciences Center. And I am joined by Shelley Welsh, who is the director of the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence, who has really just done most of the work on what we're going to discuss this afternoon. And I've got to say, has done a great job just with expanding our services and so forth. Over the past 10 years, the regulatory environment for clinical trials has exponentially changed. There are increasing regulations all the time. For example, there is a regulation now that if you're a principal investigator in a clinical trial and the trial is closed, you have to put data on the web for within 1 year of closure of the study. You might say, well, so what? Well, the so what is that there's actually on the books a $12,000 a day fine. And though it has not, to my knowledge, been collected over the past 6 to 9 months, they have started sending warning letters. And that's just an example, and I'll point out others as we go through this about what is needed to have infrastructure and systems that really support the compliant, running of clinical trials, but also really, enhance patient safety and efficiency. Those things do not come for free, unfortunately. And in discussion with Dr. Marsh and Dr. King, we really felt that clinical trials had evolved here at WVU to the point where we really needed further infrastructure that has been developed largely through Shelley's efforts and others over the past couple years. Just so you know, from comparing 2017 through 2021 to the previous 5 years before that, 2012 to 2017, clinical trials at WVU increased threefold and participants increased tenfold. So this is really a growth enterprise, and I think that is fantastic, really bringing clinical trials, to West Virginia, which I think is a measure, quite honestly, of health equity. By way of introduction, Shelley, anything else you want to say?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the slides are not moving.
Enter, maybe? Oh, there they go.
Oh, the fade out. So what we're going to discuss this afternoon are really some of the provided services, a discussion of fees, and then we'll end up with questions and answers. Dr. Marsh was going to be here to introduce and make remarks. Unfortunately, he got called to Charleston and can't make it. All of you have seen this cartoon before. The Clinical Trials Center of Excellence at the Health Science Center, I see as sort of an umbrella organization. We have many wonderful clinical trial groups, some of whom are shown in the purple boxes at the bottom of the slide. And you can see in the orange box the provided services for which there is, you can use these. They are not fee for service, are really a number of things from training and, clinicaltrials.gov support. On the other side are optional services, budget development, study coordination, and so forth, which is more of a fee for service. Just to sort of review some of the benefits, I love the way these slides actually click and fill from the bottom up, but that's sort of Shelley. Is that the way you do in your world? It's very interesting. The training, actually, the PI Academy has monthly idea labs. I want to really shout out to Debbie Lee, who does a fabulous job coordinating and really making sure that these things go. We previously had quarterly dinner meetings, which were good networking with really speakers of national significance, including FDA inspectors. And I hope if the coronavirus would behave itself, that we could get back to those. We have an online curriculum. We have mentoring. You should know that the PI Academy actually has been picked up by others. NCATS which runs, is the institute that actually leads the CTSAs out of NIH, is actually starting a PI Academy, and Hopkins, who is one of their treatment innovation network centers, has actually asked me to be on their grant. So I think that the PI Academy, which originated here, has really gotten a lot of traction. We have research personnel training that Shelley and Debbie's group run, SOPs for clinical trial group use, internal regulatory monitoring and auditing. Our view is that every trial group should be FDA ready, either for cause or not for cause audits, because what happens if the FDA comes in and does an audit for whatever reason and really gets the impression that an institution does not really have strong infrastructure, policies and procedures, they can go to any trial group at all. So it's in our best interest across this campus to ensure that we're FDA audit ready. We do IND and IDE support. We'll talk a bit about OnCore, and I mentioned the clinicaltrials.gov. The institutional benefits really include the fact that there is risk assessment. Several years ago, most of our studies on the Health Sciences Center campus are actually enrolled at Ruby. The hospital had no say in what trials were and were not done. Though there is sovereign immunity for state organizations, there is none for WVU medicine. And it is, critically important that our partners, WVU medicine among them, really have input and feel that this is a joint mission. So we developed a risk assessment tool for clinical trials that has worked really amazingly well. And we have a committee for those trials that really have the risk score of an indicator higher risk that includes 2 individuals from WVU medicine and 2 individuals from the health sciences side. Most all the studies are approved, but several have not been, and for very good reasons. Also, the Clinical Trial Center of Excellence registration gives us an accurate accounting of clinical trials. I discussed, OSP, the individual running that a couple of years, called me and said, how many trials do we have with opioids? We need to know for our liability carrier. I said, I have no idea. I don't even have any idea how many clinical trials you had, because there was absolutely no mechanism at West Virginia University that you knew how many clinical trials you had. You might say, well, you could look at the IRB. Yeah, we pulled that. There were 600 IRB approved protocols, many of which were educational programs. And so, what meets the clinical trial definition and intervention and a relevant outcome was not clear. And so the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence registration was developed so we would know that. We have then developed for the clinical trials registration a one-time $975 fee per trial. I want to emphasize this does not include any trial that was started before June 1st. It is a one-time fee, and it only addresses clinical trials that meet the NIH definition of clinical trial. As I said, an intervention with a relevant outcome. It does not include database studies, observational studies, those sorts of things. So that's the first thing to remember. On this slide, you see that over half the trials actually are industry sponsored, and this really is taken from the Center of Excellence. We started Center of Excellence registration October of 19.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's been about 1.5 years, 2 years actually. Mm-hmm. And more than half are industry sponsored. So that $975 fee is a pass through. We have others that are funded studies externally that have indirect costs. The indirect costs that go to the institution pay for that $975. Anything that CTSI, pilots or research scholars, we pay. You might say, oh, it's only 3%. This was the past 2 years. Last year was the last year of our grant cycle. So we actually funded very few pilot studies. The Cancer Center has 17% that are cooperative groups. that again get indirects, but only with enrollment. And that really leaves 12% of trials that are unfunded or investigator sponsored. In those situations, if there is no funding, the department chair or the institute director really has the responsibility to adjudicate what should go and not, and is responsible for that payment.
Can I make a comment here,
Sure.
Sally, about the funded trials for with indirects? Those the COE fee will be obtained from the research office and shouldn't be included in the budget with the grant. I've had that question before, and so you don't have to have it in a line item. It will come out of the directs behind the scenes. So if really those
Indirects.
I'm sorry, the indirects, really you don't have to do anything. The COE office will take care of that.
And also for the CTSI, you do not need to put
Yep.
the registration fee in those budgets. We will take care of it and it's covered.
Mhm.
I mentioned a little earlier that there are a la carte services, fee for services. I'm not going to read this other than to say that many of these are very useful, such as, regulatory help with IRB submissions. We have an individual who does nothing but clinical trial accounting and budgeting, and myself is the first one in line for this. Principal investigators, almost always self-included. I've been in it 35 years. And I always under budget what it's going to take. And it's really helpful to have somebody else saying, you're not having enough money there. You can see we have a number of other services there. One of the important, I think, tools that has been developed, and we've required this now for about a year on.
November of 2020.
So year and a half, not quite
All
2
right.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not quite 2 years.
Yeah. Is OnCore. OnCore is a clinical trial management system. The name actually came because originally it was from the oncology space, but this is now a widely used clinical trial management system that is used. And you can see the advantages there is that you have billing workflow with Epic, that there's centralized trial documentation. The investigator advantages will show you. There are dashboards that I think really will give you insights about efficiency, about where your operation actually could target to improve getting studies up and running. And importantly, the integration with Epic, which is a work in progress, is going now, will mitigate the billing risks. There have been some very prominent examples where there has been double billing. That is, that a research study, the services are billed out to third-party payers, CMS, and also billed to research. That's double dipping. You might have read a couple of years ago, this happened at Duke. It resulted in Duke Medicine not being able to bill CMS for a period of time and multi-million-dollar fees. I told WVU Medicine about 2 years ago, this is number one risk of the clinical trials with the hospital, because we had no system with a single bill to be dropped. The service comes and it's either research or it's not. And you must have a system that prevents that. And OnCore integrating with Epic will be able to do that. So, I mean, there are other things there, but I think that it is just essential for a number of reasons. And OnCore actually has the functionality to help investigators as well, that we really go with OnCore. Again, I'm talking clinical trials only. Mm-hmm. It is required to use in all clinical trials. Mm-hmm. It is not optional. If you're going to do clinical trials here, just like anything else, there are certain requirements, and this is one of them, and that is the reason why.
Mm-hmm. I would just add that, if you have a portfolio of trials that are not all clinical trials, there's nothing preventing you from putting all trials in OnCore, and I would encourage you to do so. But the requirement is for only clinical trials to be uploaded and entered into OnCore.
I mentioned earlier that there are tools in OnCore that really give you insights about accrual, about how the time is between the time you decide you're going to do the clinical trial and it actually gets activated. There are dashboards. You can look across your clinical trial group. If you're in pediatrics, you can look across that group. And I think that it's really, very, very helpful. And I don't know, Shelley, if you want to comment further.
Yeah, just recently had reason to look in insights on the dashboard, and was able to provide and pull meaningful data that helped us very quickly determine our race and ethnicity on a certain number of trials. So that's certainly helpful maybe at a project management level. But as Sally mentioned, it's important milestones to be able to track from site selection to your first patient in. Those metrics can be in there. And then as a PI, you certainly at any time you want to understand accrual for a specific project, you can look at those as well. And there's a number of reports. I probably am not the best person, but I know we have people on our team, especially in the Cancer Institute, that regularly uses these, and certainly can help set up dashboards for you if you are interested in that.
And I think this next slide just is a little more granular. Yeah. I mean, this shows the activation sort of trends, your group is 14% slower. I mean, you can compare to whatever you want. IRB submission to IRB approval. I mean, budget turnaround. There's just a number of things. Contract turnaround. We have had a big issue at WVU with contracts recently. I will say, and this is really not part of this discussion, but OSP has actually gotten contracted outside, and I think has cleaned up most of the backlog, which was enormous. But I mean, you'll have the data. You'll have the data about your contracts. So there's certain types of studies that are taking longer. Why is that? And it can be really useful to, I think, make your operation more efficient.
Yeah, and to be able to get meaningful data out of the dashboard, you do have to put in and use the task list, and you have to capture the dates of when you got site selected, when you got contract approved. Those dates are easily populated in OnCore to be able to drive this data.
Yeah. And then, another thing that I think that is in the future, and that really is having OnCore be able to talk with Epic for patient results. So you don't have, there was an occurrence where actually a lab study did not get into the OnCore system. Physician did not see it. Creatinine went up. Dosing was wrong. Patient was not harmed. But I think, that's again, it is so busy. Investigators have so much to do that we must have these tools that actually make it much easier to be compliant and enhance patient safety. We also have another system that actually I really love this, and it's called the eReg system. It's an electronic regulatory file that facilitates, efficiency. Before the regulatory folks would be running after me to get my signature. I was running off to God knows where. This is very simple. It interfaces with OnCore and also with Advera central IRB platforms. We have many trials that utilize that central IRB. You get an email, you click it, you go into eReg. If you want to review the document's right there, and you sign it off electronically. It is an enormous time saver. And it's also a time saver for coordinators and for regulatory personnel as well.
And sponsors.
Yeah. And it's obviously validated to FDA standards. Okay, so I've been making a case for these systems and what they do. And of course, the problem is in this life that nothing is for free. And this is what the system costs. The total Advera system, that is with OnCore fees and eReg, is a total for the institution. And I want to be clear, I know we have some folks from other institutions in West Virginia, and you are welcome, but these fees are only for WVU. And it's, I would say, WVU Health Sciences at this point, though there has been talk about expanding them to WVU. So for WVU, $285 per annum covers OnCore and eReg.
285,000.
What did I say?
285.
Well, yeah, but you guys can see the zeros there.
Okay.
285K. Is that right?
There you go. There you go.
Okay. And so we really looked at this, and I'll tell you, sort of the cancer center has put some in the past year, and actually CTSI has picked this up because we wanted an equitable, fair time. It was the pandemic. The last thing people needed was some, more fees and so forth. So we have been really, really working. And what we came up with is that everybody that does an industry study, everybody, because that's the only way it's going to work. And if everybody doesn't do this with their industry studies, that delta that I'm going to talk about in a minute is going to be greater. And you're going to have to take more money out of your back pocket. So everybody who does an industry study needs to put in their industry budget $2,500 for the clinical trial management system. Now, I got to tell you, and I actually ran medical affairs for BMS Virology for 5 years in a past life. Industry really likes systems that actually increase accountability, improve efficiency. Shelley and her crew looked at several other institutions. This was actually a little bit on the lower side. Some institutions had it much higher. And we put it here at 2,500 because we thought that it would not be a hard sell. Shelley and her group has developed a document if you need a letter, to sort of explain to industry if you get pushback. And certainly we would be delighted to support you in any way if you get pushback. We don't anticipate a lot. When looking on the data we have for the past year or two, you can see that we have 60 trials roughly a year that are industry trials. If everybody gets that 2,500 in a pass through, that's $150,000 that external folks are paying for, leaving a delta of only 135 that has to be covered with WVU. And so how are we going to do that fairly? Well, what we did is we looked at groups that did trials. We looked at everybody. You can see here, there are 6 colored bars and then there's a step off, okay? And I'll just tell you, if you can't see it, it's ophthalmology, peds, Heart and Vascular Institute, medicine. Oops. Go backwards. Sorry about that, guys. I was trying to use the mouse, but I'll just keep my hands off that. Heart and Vascular Institute, Department of Medicine, the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute, and of course the Cancer Center, really has the most, and this is numbers of trials. And so what we said is actually what we will do is apportion the 135,000 by the percentage of active trials for these 6 groups. Everything down here in gray, 2, 3, 4 trials, the CTSI is covering all of those. I've spoken with all of the institute directors and department heads, so they're aware of this. And that'll be an annual fee. The cancer centers you can see is the highest, but most of them, are not. Most of these are on the order of $10,000 to $12,000. Cancer Institute was it 35, 39?
Something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's lower than what they had been paying.
Right. Now, I just want to say a couple things. When I've talked to institute directors and department heads, they have said, well, you mean I have to pay every time for a trial? No, let me be very clear. The COE fee that we discussed a few minutes ago is a one-time fee per trial, $975. The fees that really cover the eReg and the OnCore system are a per annum and are really borne by those 6 groups that are actually the most active clinical trial groups, with the CTSI covering the rest. So, and what we will do is review each year, because these things are likely to change a little bit. Hopefully everybody's growing. If some of these guys down here in the gray are actually, sort of go up over the step, then we will sort of apportion those as well. But it doesn't matter, because we are actually, a CTSI is covering all those that don't have what we considered a quantum number. And, I really want to open this up for questions. Shelley, other things that you would suggest?
Well, I think you hit on the point that the OnCore and the CTSI COE fee are two separate fees, and not to be confused. And so COE fees, you had that chart of how they were going to be captured. For the OnCore fee, it's only industry. So don't, if you have a cooperative study, the COE or the CTMS fee is not applicable. So it's a little bit confusing. And if you have any questions, we're certainly here to help with answer those questions. And if you have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, I think, just the 3 points, just to really sort of make it really easy. COE fees, one time, new trials, only clinical trials. These are only trials that you register for the COE, when you go on the web. The OnCore and eReg studies are the 6 groups we've talked about, and then the others that are from indirects will come out automatically. But the important thing is that, even if you're sort of sitting down here, and just have a couple trials, all the industry trials in every department have got the budget, that $2,500 for clinical trial management system. And if you don't remember anything else today, that is the important thing to remember. We'll be happy to sort of help you sort of do that.
Mm-hmm. And then the other little point that I also wanted to make sure is that you won't have to do the invoicing. Michelle Beatty and my team will do the invoicing once the fees for both of those are in the budgets and in the contracts.
Questions?
Ask people if they have questions to unmute themselves. They can't hear me.
Okay, so if you have questions, we have none in the chat, but please unmute yourself. Questions, comments, complaints, anything you want to say. Well, we're happy to entertain anything.
Hi guys, this is Anne from the Cancer Center. I do have a question regarding the invoicing. So is Michelle going to be invoicing us on the department level for the OnCore fees?
For the annual fee, not per trial?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had that discussion with Hannah earlier. So, that just comes as one invoice for the entire year.
Okay. And then my second question is, I just want to clarify with the fee schedule for the annual OnCore utilization fees, if they're the older trials that were prior to this fee going to effect for sponsor, will they still be on our invoices, or is Michelle going to be filtering out just the trials that are activated after June 1st?
The latter, yes, just those that are activated after June the 1st. And so that one-time annual fee for OnCore, Michelle will be invoicing departments. And then let's say you have a trial in September and you've got it's industry and you have that in your budget, the COE fee and the OnCore fee, Michelle's going to invoice the sponsor directly.
I do want to say though, that this, sort of slide was predicated on 2 years of COE data. Okay. And so then when we look at it each year, because obviously, sort of the new trials usually sort of take up, more of the activity, then we'll really sort of look at the new trials. Now, I don't expect though the percent to decrease. The number of trials per year will decrease, but then it'll be a portion, it'll still probably be roughly the same percentage, I would imagine.
Probably.
Yeah.
We'll see. Is that clear, Anne? Did that help?
Yes. So you said Michelle she will be invoicing the sponsor directly, or she will always go to the department?
So for the apportioned fee of that, go back. Can we go to the slide right there? So the last bullet point of the 135,000
Mhm.
that's remaining. That's going to be an annual fee that each center is going to pay. And so Michelle will do an invoice to you for that,
Okay.
for the department. And then those for the OnCore and COE fees moving forward for clinical trials for industry, she will be directly invoicing the sponsor.
That's for the $2,500.
The 2,500 and the 975.
Yeah.
If it's industry, those two would be together.
And the 975, remember, is the COE
COE fee.
registration fee. 52% of our trials are industry. So
Right. Yep.
Okay. I would be interested and curious from other departments because we have some sponsors who refuse to line item our startups. And that
Okay.
$2,500 has to be built into our startup. So if they received an invoice, they wouldn't know what that was for. So we
Okay.
have other sponsors who refuse to pay for internal CTMS fees. So we have to make it a generic institutional startup fee.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think we're working, I don't think we're working. We are working with the business office to, if that's the case, then once it's received at the university, we'll work with the business office before that money gets dispersed to the institution or to the department. And, you know, they would then divide the fees appropriately.
But I think, Ann, you bring up a good point because at least in my, sort of past, frequently industry communicates either with coordinator, if they know the coordinator, or with the principal investigator. And so this is not to go around or cut those folks out
No.
at all. The purpose for this is if you so desire, we will be happy to do that invoicing for you. But, we are happy to work with you. If there's a better way to work with the Cancer Institute
Mhm.
and you would prefer to sort of put it in the invoices, and I can understand that because a lot of these industry guys, they get to know you and it's just a
Mhm.
lot easier. It's, who's this hotter person, right? She's not an oncologist. So anyway, I think that any way that you think we can make your job easier relevant to these fees, we're happy to do.
Yeah, I think the other point too is I think that the IRB is also invoicing. So potentially one sponsor is going to get 3 invoices, which can be confusing. So I think that's it's going to have to be a very fluid process and, monitoring of it.
Yeah, and tell us what you need. I mean, I'll just be completely honest. We're rolling this out. This is the first year. I'm sure there'll be learnings.
Yeah.
And, if you have better ideas or things that really will make your job easier, let us know.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon. Again, please call Shelley Welsh, Debbie Lee. You'll probably get quicker answers from them than me, but you are welcome to call or email me. And anything we can do or clear up or any questions, please direct that. And I think Debbie said that this is being taped.
Yes.
So it'll be, available for subsequent review.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
Thank you.